Hi, everyone. I am here with Rosie Tilley today, who is head of development for Charney Companies, a vertically integrated real estate construction and brokerage firm based in New York City. And in this role, Rosie oversees their pipeline of 2,000 units of built-to-rent and condominium units. I'm here with Rosie Tilley today, who is head of development for Charney Companies, a vertically integrated real estate construction and brokerage firm based in New York City. What's going on? And in this role, Rosie oversees their...
We're going to try this again.
Okay. Try again?
Yeah, you're good. You could just speak. But
was it coming back through her channel or my channel? Or
that was odd.
That has not happened before. No. Okay. All right, we're gonna try this again. Okay. Okay, in case we got an echo to be certain. I am here today with Rosie Tilley, who is head of development at Charney Companies, a vertically integrated real estate construction and brokerage firm based here in New York City. And in this role, Rosie oversees their pipeline of 2,000 plus units of built-to-rent and condominium units from project conception and acquisition through construction completion. Rosie has an incredible background. We're going to get into this today. We had the pleasure of sitting on a panel and this with Connect Media. Was that right?
Yeah.
That was a lot of fun. So welcome, Rosie. Thank you so much for joining us.
I'm so glad to.
Wonderful. Okay, so why don't you tell us a little bit about how you got into the business? I saw that you were at Columbia. Now, did you study real estate there, or what was the...
No. I studied urban studies and economics.
Okay.
Which is the coolest combination,
Mm-hmm.
especially in the city. And I didn't know when I came to Columbia what real estate development was or really what I wanted to do. But, you get to the city and you experience the magic of the city.
Right.
And I wanted to be a part of that and make that. But I didn't want to be an architect.
Got it. Is that what you were actually learning in school then, or as
No,
far as
no.
the planning aspect? What does that mean, or what was your coursework like there?
Very interdisciplinary. Urban studies was this is the stuff I like to read on my own time. I'm a, geek about Robert Moses and the built environment and all of that.
Yeah.
And then combined with the quantitative support economics, to
Got
make
it.
real.
So you've read The Power Broker,
Of course.
Yeah.
And listened to it again recently.
I had this was probably before the e-readers, and so I had the hard copy book, but it was so big. I think it's 1,500 pages to carry it around. I had actually, maybe this was sacrilege, but I'd actually separated. I put the book in two pieces, but wild. To think about what was kind of done, and I know that there's, any thoughts on his approach? He got a lot of stuff done, but definitely was a kind of a wrecking ball at times in the process.
When I was in school, Ken Jackson, who's a professor at Columbia, was leading a kind of revisionist history, kind of revisiting of Robert Moses's legacy in a more positive light. Of course, it's controversial, but I don't know. I think, especially when we think about the problems facing cities today, sometimes you need big infrastructure, big moves,
Right.
Like he was able to effectuate.
He really liked cars and highways, right? Maybe not so much about the public transportation. So that I think that was some of the criticism that it kind of cut off, some of the accessibility at times.
Yeah, and turned our back on the waterways. And,
Right.
Every time you drive the LIE 5 hours out to the Hamptons,
Yes.
we can thank him that we're not riding a train.
So if you're into this kind of thing, not sitting on the LIE for 5 hours, but studying urban planning, I just finished Dan Doctoroff's book. Have you read that?
No, not yet. I'm
Amazing.
on the wait list at my library.
Outstanding. And I didn't realize that, and I had the chance to hear Dan speak, and he talked about, he came from private equity, and his passion was bringing the Olympics to New York City. And with his 2012 plan, that was the basis that would ultimately encourage 40% of the city to be rezoned. And a lot of it was around that Olympic plan. And I didn't, at that point, Bloomberg had reached out to him. So it's a great read.
Yeah.
So interesting. Okay. So you graduated from Columbia. Now what?
When I was in school, I cold called around to developers in the city and in Boston over summers. And so I got to work when I was going to school for developers. I'd go to class in the morning and then take the train downtown and work on job sites or work in offices, kind of doing anything I could do with different developers. My first...
Before we get to this, okay, because we do get students who certainly listen to the show. In fact, we have a student in our studio today from Fordham, and we love Fordham. But I want to go back to what you said. So you're at school and you're cold calling developers. I mean, my sons and love them to death, but God help them if they'd ever have to like pick up the phone and call somebody, as opposed to sending an email, texting or snapping or whatever else they do.
Yeah,
But you just
pick up the
just
phone.
picked up the phone and you called a developer. And what did that conversation go like?
I grew up in Boston, so I was going home for the summer, and so I made a list of Boston developers from Googling Boston developers, and I would call the front desk and ask to speak with someone who dealt with hiring or intern programs.
Okay.
And I finally made my way through to Win Companies. They're a major developer
yeah.
in Boston, big affordable housing developer. And I got the ear of, someone there, essentially the assistant to Larry Curtis, who led their development practice at the time.
But were most people like hanging up on you when you called? Like,
yeah.
oh, we don't have a job.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or our intern program isn't live. Our intern program window closed 6 months ago. I mean, developers are lean, right? There aren't a lot of internship opportunities.
So were you just saying, hey, I'd just love to come and learn and I'll come work for free? Or like, what was
I'll
your...
do anything you need doing.
Okay.
I just want to learn. This is about, so much of this industry is about osmosis and apprenticeship.
So what did you end up doing at Win? And they're, if I'm not mistaken, one of the largest affordable workforce housing, I think, is really their niche. So what kind of things were you doing?
I led a lot, or I worked with the woman leading their green building work at the time, which was very nascent. This is like 2006. LEED was kind of a new thing. So thinking about all of these units, which, need to run efficiently and productively, how could they leverage green programs to do that? That was a new thing to me. I had to learn about all of
So I
that
saw somewhere in your bio, so you ended up getting LEED certified. Is that the designation?
Yeah.
So did that come later, I guess? Or
Yeah. Well, when I graduated college, no one was developing anything. It was the great financial crisis.
Right.
Sad climate.
Yes.
So I went to work for a sustainability consulting firm where I worked with developer clients to incorporate efficiency measures in their buildings. And through that, I spent a lot of time on construction sites, learning design, learning construction, how's stuff's supposed to translate from the page to the field, things like that. And then I was hired away by Steiner, who was one of my clients.
Yes. Okay. And I want to get, and he's actually been on this show as well.
Oh, yeah?
He's got an amazing story. But okay, so you're working as a sustainability consultant. So I think, a lot of people, I think, or hopefully everybody would agree with the need to be more environmentally friendly. But I would imagine, so as a consultant, you're asking these developers to spend more money to do certain things. So, and interestingly, I actually just had Douglas Durst on the show as well, and he was talking about his passion for sustainability. But then he also said that most of these sustainability measures are paid back in 6-7 years. So again, you outlay the investment, but then there's a return. And then obviously for the life of the building, then you have a much more efficient building. Energy costs are reduced, better for the environment. So was that kind of the case that you were trying to make at the time?
Yeah. It's just smart, right? As an owner, especially if you're talking to an owner operator, it's just smart.
Right.
Like there may be marketability to having a credential on your building.
Right.
You're doing good intangible things for the environment by selecting materials which are low impact. But the easiest way to get a developer to, front load costs or do something new and take a risk in their building is to explain payback and economics.
So what were the top 2 or 3 things that you would recommend that a developer does?
A good tight building envelope.
Okay.
And actually now so much of code has caught up with all of this. When I was doing this 15 years ago, longer than that, like it was pioneering. Now you essentially have to do this stuff. And the city's really supportive in rewarding that too. Now there are zoning reductions for doing that.
How much? So I'm getting ready to build a project. It's a vacation home, but I'm looking in and kind of studying, ranging from the traditional way of stick built to then you've got modular, then you've got SIP insulated paneling where it like comes like almost in a Lego set and you kind of assemble it on site. I've heard also here in New York that we've had passive houses that are, they've got redundancy and insulation and the energy costs are so much better. So, how much of that were you studying methodology of construction just because you brought up, that it's so important to have that tight envelope. So how much of this new technology and the way people build is helpful to achieve that today?
I think that all of those means are so smart. And there's a lot of interesting work being done right now with modular, whether it's panelized or volumetric, and how can you bring efficiency to time in the field and minimize disruption on site? It's just so hard to do. When I was working in California, we spent a lot of time assessing this. And there's so much innovation in this
Right.
space, but it's just hard to get right and do in a way that's cost effective in the way that a developer would want in order to take a bet on that new approach.
So after when and graduating, what was, and you said you went to Steiner then, who was one of your clients,
Yes,
right?
that was my
So
first developer job.
now Steiner, who has a pretty large retail footprint across the country, but also a very prolific developer here in New York, and Steiner Studios,
Yeah,
one
very
of the first,
pioneering.
new film studios here in New York. So what type of projects were you working on for him?
I was working on multifamily and condo. We built a condo in the East Village.
I remember that one,
Steiner's
Avenue
Village.
A, was
Yeah,
it?
yeah.
That was great. You all did really well with that.
We did really well. That was a phenomenal building. When we acquired that from the Archdiocese of New York, people thought that we were nuts for our basis at the time, which I think was like low 200s. And we did so well at that
Wow.
project. It's a phenomenal building. It's a building that doesn't feel new in that
Yeah.
in that location. It was so important.
So Doug had done retail, he'd done kind of large scale and film studios, and then doing a condo in the East Village. I mean, you could say, oh, well, it's all development, but it is very different. So was it just being opportunistic and kind of thinking where the opportunities were, or was there kind of a certain path that you were?
No, I think it's being opportunistic, and that's what was fun about working at a family office. You have a different calculus, right,
Right.
than an institutional owner does. And you can push the envelope a little bit and do passion projects and things that sound
Right.
fun, like building a movie studio in the Navy Yard.
Yeah.
Or doing this condo or building a 53-story building in downtown Brooklyn.
I don't know why I'm remembering this point in particular, but I remember Doug saying that, and I don't even know how it came up, but we talked about insurance. He says, I don't do insurance. I'm like, what do you mean you don't do insurance? He's like, what's the point? I could self-insure. I mean, he has a very different perspective on how he approaches things. It's like, to me, it seems like he just doesn't take the status quo for granted on like, this is how you do in a development. He's like, okay, well, I'm sure for some projects you have to get insurance if you're going to do, get a construction loan or whatever. But it really seemed like he just was, again, he just kind of marched to the beat of his own. I forget whatever the cliche is. Something about drumming, and you're not drumming with them. But I mean, was this kind of a unconventional way to learn the business and his approach?
Yeah, but I learned so much. I mean, from Doug and from his dad, David,
right,
who died last year. I think I learned so much from him about building.
And what kind of things in particular?
About how you're supposed to build and how you build for generations and what quality means in the
Right.
field. He'd come around and watch, he was in his 80s. He'd come and watch concrete pours. He'd come and watch the crane be jumped. He knew every detail.
Right. So, and that's kind of counter to, you think, some developers, I mean, obviously their profit is tied to not only what they could sell the units for, but what it costs to get there. So you always worry, like, did the developer cut corners? Did they build it on the cheap? So like, why would they, I guess, over-engineer a building, if you will, or really build to that in perpetuity? I mean, certainly if they're going to hold, that makes sense. I guess if you're going to condo, you're going to be responsible for what you build. But that's interesting. So there was a real emphasis on doing things right.
Yeah, on quality. And that, I mean, I've had that. I've had at every place that I've worked, that's been the directive. A lot of it is reputational too.
Right.
This is a small business. People are entrusting a lot with you.
Right.
When they are buying a home or renting a home, quality is paramount.
So was most of your construction knowledge, was it picked up along the way of just observing, or are you actually like going to school to learn construction?
No, just all in the field as I go.
Just figuring it out.
Asking a lot of questions, asking every question. You
Right.
can't be embarrassed to ask questions.
So what is that? Just, I mean, again, if you remember those early days of like being on the job site, like what are the questions you're asking? Who are you spending time with? And if pouring a foundation, like what are the kind of things that you're observing and learning?
Yeah, well, say, drilling piles,
Okay.
you do test piles, but you do like 5 different kinds of piles. Why? Why is one better than the other? And what does it mean for the cost of the building when you're designing your foundation? How can you be efficient with that, right? And through everything, quality, but efficiency, right?
Right.
And that kind of striking that fine balance of quality and efficiency. And if you have really smart subcontractors, some of these field guys are the smartest guys on jobs, and really smart engineers and smart ownership, then there are enough people around, you can just pepper them.
I mean, how much of development is kind of cookie cutter where like, oh, well, of course, these are the kind of pilings we need because this is the water tables here and this is what we need to do and this is how you execute it? Or is it like you'll get one engineer who says, okay, well, this is what we need to do and we need to drill down and hit bedrock or, whatever it is. But like how much of that kind of figuring out the best development course is, are you trying to figure out day in and day out? And I mean, do you get different recommendations from different professionals? And then how do you know what's the best advice?
Well, I have learned you can't take anything as a given, right? Everyone in this, there are lots of very experienced people in this business who have seen everything, but they may have a standard operating procedure of the way that they may design something. And also maybe it's easier just to copy a detail from the last job to your job. But is it right for my job? And is it the best approach for my job and the most efficient approach? You have to question every single assumption from all the way from the beginning of design, especially at the beginning of design when you're setting out, when you're building the foundation blocks, if you will, of what the building will become.
And how many times, I mean, I'm sure learning along the way also involves making mistakes. I mean, I'm sure there's things that happen where, and again, maybe there was the best intentions, but, construction can be messy and it's not always predictable, right? So were there things along the way where you learned, okay, well, maybe we should have done things differently?
Yeah. From a development perspective too. And sometimes that winds up being all right. Like at Steiner East Village, we designed essentially just short of a building permit as a rental. And it would have been a good rental, but it was a little iffy. Like we needed really top of market rents, trending. Everyone had faith in the market, and I think it would have done well as a rental there. But condo was really the best execution. So we wound up scrapping that design, all the time that we'd spent, and re-going it as a condo, which wound up being the best option. Condo was risky though, right?
Yeah.
But we would have saved some time, maybe met the market earlier, saved a lot of money.
So in my book, I talk about the different ways to get involved in real estate investing. And I'd say that, development is the one. I mean, if you look at kind of the risk spectrum, right, where, as core plus, value add, opportunistic. I mean, of course, if you're developing, you're taking on a lot of risk and looking for outsized returns. That being said, I mean, it would seem that in development, when you're coming out of the ground, there is the most, the highest likelihood that there could be an issue, cost overruns, whatever it is. So what I say in the book is that if you have not done development before, I would not, encourage you to just jump in, certainly for your first project to build out of the ground. I mean, does that make sense to you where like this is really a business where you don't want to try to attempt something ground up if you've never done this before?
Yeah, it takes optimism, it takes patience, and it takes a lot of resources.
Right.
We're doing brownfield redevelopment right now in Gowanus, and it's taking us longer to come out of the ground than we'd like. It's just,
right. And this is someone who's, Charney, who's in the business of, construction, has done this before, has tackled brownfield sites, and even then.
This is our third one in the neighborhood.
Right. So, I guess then the answer is, for you, if someone did want to eventually go out and do development on their own, I mean, to actually work for other developers would almost be a prerequisite.
Yeah, learn on someone else's.
Yes.
Learn on someone else's time.
So, okay. So
but
you finished
that sense of ownership.
So was it, so with Steiner and then you spent some time at Twining, was it then that you went out to the West Coast or no?
After Steiner, I worked for RXR.
Okay.
RXR building here when they were building out their development team.
Okay.
In New York City, we had folks who were working on stuff in New Rochelle, folks who were working on things in the city, and that's what I was doing.
And did you find, I mean, when you made transitions from Steiner to RXR, I mean, you've worked at a lot of great shops. Like, when did you, and this is probably a great question for those listening who are probably, 5-10 years into their career. How did you know when it was time to make a transition? And it's like, that's always a tough choice, and you're good people and you're grateful to everything they've taught you, but it's like, okay, thanks. Now I'm going to go work for a competitor. Right. I mean, maybe that's not what obviously what was said, but it's like, there is that, when you make that transition, right? So how did you navigate that? When did you decide was the right time to move on? I mean, was there ever a thought, well, hey, maybe I'll just spend my entire career at Steiner?
Yeah, sometimes opportunities approach you, right? And I have always tried to keep an open mind. And, sometimes this becomes deal based too and deal flow based. And you look at
Yeah.
the pipeline and you see, the direction of what's coming. And do I want to work on this or do I want to grow, in this other aspect of my
Yeah.
job? It's hard to know when to take a risk and when to move.
And what's the right way to transition? I would be surprised if you just told me you just showed up to Doug's office and you're like, here's my 2 weeks notice. I
Yeah.
mean, was this, or sometimes, I mean, maybe it's, you kind of have to do that way because you're just kind of the way things line up. But how did you make that transition? And it sounds like you're still on great terms with everyone you've worked with. So how do you make that transition?
Well, it's a small community in real estate, not just
Right.
in New York, even nationally. I mean, I
Right.
found in California, I was always bumping up against people from New York.
Right.
So you got to keep your friends, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's it's so important wherever you work to build strong relationships. Eventually, I think, people, of course, in the short term, it's disappointing to lose a team member whom you've invested in, but also people want what's best for you and what's
Right.
right for you, right? And I've always had the good fortune to work for people who were very supportive of me and my career and my growth.
And do you feel like you train people along the way? Because I'm sure, at the beginning, I mean, you probably start off as a junior associate. As you get more seniority, then you have people working under you, right?
Yeah.
I mean, how many people right now are kind of on your development team, or would you?
We have a lean and mean team,
Right.
and it's really an all hands on deck.
Okay.
And our development team is maybe 8 people at
Okay.
Charney. At Lendlease, we had a bigger team.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I mean, that's a
Yeah.
lot more people. So I would think even
Different
if you're
approach.
moving on from, one of these firms, that hopefully you've trained some people along the
Oh,
way
yeah.
also who maybe it's an opportunity for them to step up and continue to grow as well.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if I've done anything right, then that's exactly what's happening.
Yeah, I think and one of my mentors, still to this day, Paul Massey, would always say that when you're in, maybe it doesn't have to be a crossroads in your career, but you're kind of looking for that next step, and how to have that conversation with your current employer and to kind of talk about the things that you're looking to do, and
Yeah.
kind of making an open conversation. And again, people, if they're doing the right thing, they want, an employer wants the best for their people and want to continue to grow. I mean, we've certainly had plenty of salespeople who've been on our team and then move on. Many of them actually go to the principal side, which I think is like the highest compliment. Like, hey, you start as a broker and now you're going to be a principal, and now, hey, guess what? We have a contact at that,
Yeah.
that firm now. So it's always, great to continue those connections. Okay, so eventually though, you did head out to the West Coast, Palo
Yeah.
Alto, right? So you're working with Lendlease. And this was a joint venture master plan in Mountain View. So what was that? So I mean, Lendlease was then kind of the third party developer for Google. Is that what?
Yeah, Lendlease had a very kind of innovative joint venture agreement with Google to design and entitle master plans on Google's holdings in the Bay Area, of which there are many.
Yeah, how many acre?
Lots
Like,
and
what are we
lots and
talking
lots of
about
square
here?
feet, millions of square feet. We broke them into 4 different master plans, and they would all be 24/7 communities, live, work, play. Everybody knows there's a housing shortage in the Bay Area. I mean,
Yeah.
the statistic for a long time was that for every 6 jobs created, there was 1 unit of housing created. There was a poll at one point saying that more internal to people who worked at Google, but more people wanted to work at Google in Pittsburgh than in the Bay because you just couldn't buy, rent a house.
So Google said we're gonna build housing for our employees.
Not specifically for their employees. They're going to build housing, free market housing, that's going to be in these areas where our employees happen to work, as do plenty of other, tech communities. No one wants to live in like Googleville. That's
Yeah.
not any fun.
Right.
But if, we designed these master plans that were very compelling with open space and retail and, innovative design and, a very sustainable community. And you roll out of bed and go to work, or you hop on a bike and head to your office a couple miles away.
And what was your role in all this?
I was leading the residential development of our 7,000 units in Mountain View at Google's headquarters.
7,000 units.
7,000
Okay, so how do you
units.
go about doing that?
26 buildings. You
Okay.
think about scale. It was a really, really great intellectual exercise about how a community built from scratch should work and what's the most efficient way to strike that balance.
Yeah.
And without it feeling like a company town, without it feeling, big and oppressive where every building looks the same. So we broke the residential piece of this master plan into subphases, broke the buildings into large enough buildings so that they would be cost effective to build and to operate, but then could also fit as part of a little neighborhood
Right.
of buildings. And so, our idea was that you would have this passport essentially within your community, and you can live in this building, but you go to the gym in this building, you go to the pool in this
Yeah.
building. You have friends all over the place throughout this community, and you feel connected through kind of a scheme of communities from the very
Yeah.
intimate of your building up until to the more macro of the whole community.
And even though this wasn't specifically for Google, I mean, Google owned, and I've seen some of their properties. I mean, nothing that they do is cookie cutter. So, I mean, I would think, I mean, this probably, I mean, was there just one architect and one planner? Were you like bringing in different design professionals so every building had its own look and feel?
Yeah, we had a very talented and large crew of architects and design professionals
Right.
on the team, from master planners and then also through to the vertical. And we're taking an approach to hire one or a few. We called them executive residential architects. So folks who could implement standards and efficiencies across all of the buildings, like
Yeah.
say for the building's backbones and skeletons. So we don't need to draw the same roofing detail 26 times. We don't need to draw, the same elevator plan 26 times. But they would partner with design architects on each distinct building
Yeah.
to get that diversity of place.
So, I mean, this is a massive job. What does your typical day look like doing that? I mean, are you just, you're overseeing the other, you're working with architects? Are you on site? You're watching them, pouring foundations? I mean, what would
I
a
wish,
typical
pouring foundations.
No,
We
no.
didn't make it that far.
So you were just getting the plans approved and teed up, and then
Yeah, essentially building the business plan and putting the development framework in place for execution. The
how long did that all take? I mean, and
a
you're
very long time.
yeah, and you're working with the municipalities, right? So you're building roads, like
California.
I mean,
Yeah.
water. I mean,
Yeah, the master plan. How long did it take to get entitled? I think 5 years.
Yeah.
To entitle the master plan, which would have facilitated
Yeah.
the essentially as of right as you
Yeah.
can get in that market
Yeah.
for the vertical buildings. The market in the Bay is just challenged right now.
Yeah.
And real estate came to mean after the pandemic something very different
Yeah.
to the tech community than it did when this agreement was struck, when this
Right.
joint venture was established
Right.
pre-pandemic.
So I had Philip Huffines on my show from Huffines Community down in Texas, and his whole business is actually getting sites not just entitled, but getting all the infrastructure work and basically getting them shoveled ready.
Right.
And I asked him, like, why at that point, like, why wouldn't you see it through? I mean, but that's I mean, the actual like entitlement and all that work is so intensive.
Yes.
Right. It almost becomes its own business of itself. So
You can
okay.
be very successful doing that too.
So you're out in Palo Alto, and then I mean, working for an incredible company, and then you're thinking, I got to come back to New York, or what?
I'm back. Yeah. Unfortunately, Lend-Lease and Google ended their partnership.
Okay.
Essentially everything about the post-pandemic world.
Right. Okay.
Where construction costs were, where office was, where
Yeah.
Google wanted to invest their money.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, the world just changed.
Right.
Between 2018 and 2023. So, faced with what to do next, I came home back to the city.
Got it. Okay. And you got the family at the time as well, so
Yeah,
people are coming
yeah.
back with you. So how did that go?
Yeah, they took a bet on me, right? My husband, left his job here. We had lived here for many years, but took a bet on me and take this role.
I mean, that's a big move. Like I think a lot of people, I don't know, I have no backup data to support this, but like picking up and moving to a new market, like that's, and how, I mean, you were already pretty advanced in your career. I mean, there was plenty. Was it just the opportunity where you're saying, I got to just go wherever this is? Or were you just looking, I mean.
You don't get a call like that every day.
Yeah.
Like, it was just such an amazing opportunity.
Yeah.
And there's such smart people who are working on it.
Right.
You have to be smart to work in this business, but I think that really some of the brightest people were working on this. And to join that, to do something which really felt transformational, that was really going to push me,
Right.
to do something more, than
Right.
I was doing here. So, we moved our 3-year-old, all of our stuff, settled in a new place. I'd never lived outside of New York City except for growing up. I mean,
And did you already have the job at Charney when you came back, or like were you like, I'm just going to come back and figure it out?
no, I led a job search from there, talking to folks in every market I had, like.
And you're still calling the offices? No,
Yeah,
you're
essentially.
You
like,
are. You're not using
leveled up a little bit, but no, not with a headhunter, but just
networking,
with
asking connections.
relationships. Yeah, I had 116 different networking calls. I had a spreadsheet of all of my phone calls.
Wow, you are super. Wow, that's Okay, this is
It was
no
amazing.
surprise where you are today. I mean, it's and maybe this, and for those listening to this right now who are really senior in the careers, and it happens. Like a good friend just said, "Hey, James, we're downsizing. We are not active in this market anymore." I mean, this is a person with 30 plus years experience, like very high level, and it happens, and it's like. So at this point, you're really senior. You got a lot of incredible experience. So like at this point, are you thinking, okay, I can go work with another big shop? I've worked on some of the biggest projects. Do I go start my own thing?
Yeah.
Do I go work for a boutique? Like what was the thought process there?
Yeah. Well, I would have loved to have started my own thing. But at the time that I was doing this, also, I was 6 months pregnant.
Okay.
Which adds a twist. So,
Okay.
like,
all right.
taking a risk like that just wasn't
Yeah.
something that I was going to be ready for.
Uh-huh.
I mean, it also, lots of headwinds against development nationally,
Yeah.
in the last 12 months.
Yeah.
I was looking a lot at institutions, educational institutions, hospitals, healthcare, things like that. More
Like in-house
resilient-
as
Yeah.
in-house real estate. Yeah.
Yeah. More resilient
Yeah.
places. I mean, those guys still build
Right.
institutions,
But tell us about
backbones
Charney,
of
because
things.
this is like very entrepreneurial, right? I mean, not like
Yeah.
you said, Lane and Maine.
Yeah.
So how did you end up deciding on Charney?
Well, I was so fortunate to be introduced to Sam Charney and Justin Pelsinger, the president and COO, through a friend of mine here in New York. And, we had a Zoom call. I came out and sat with them in their office, and we just really hit it off. I mean, these are good people, smart people, passionate people.
They started on the construction side, right? They were doing a lot of third-party stuff, right?
No, and
They didn't.
Sam.
Always developers.
Sam came out of Two Trees.
Ah,
and
okay.
And learned that kind of
I knew
integrated
that, yeah.
approach. Yeah. So building what it means to build for yourself and then, hold and operate the asset. And of course, that makes you a smarter builder. You're thinking about the long term and developer in general. And then he went out on his own maybe 10 years ago, a little more than 10 years ago. And he and Justin, Lean and Mean, built this incredible, track record. And then really,
How do they find the capital for that? That's always the big thing when you go out on your own. It's like development is obviously very expensive. And again, we talked about, this is kind of can be up the risk scale.
Yeah.
It's up there. So like finding believers, it's like, okay, well, you did this for a big giant, organization, but now it's you,
Yeah.
How do they find the backing to do that?
really good relationships.
Yeah.
Really good relationships.
Institutional
and
or
building
like friends and
reputation.
family or?
Starting friends and family, but now institutional. I mean, we've really, anteed up, if you
Right.
will, with our work in Gowanus right now. We have 4 buildings under construction with 1,200 units.
Wow.
With, the highest quality institutional partners. Related as a partner of ours. Affinius. We have, now stellar
Yeah.
capital partners.
Yeah.
Which is nice validation of the quality of work we're doing.
So is that kind of what attracted them to you, is that you had kind of this institutional backing? Or was it just kind of, you kind of had the same vision as far as kind of how to approach development? Like when you said that you just hit it off, what was
Yeah.
it that?
I think both of those things. And also now they're poised to grow, right? So how can we grow the company to
Right.
scale up to meet this growing pipeline and
Yeah.
meet the requirements of more institutional capital partners?
Yeah.
In my experience, is useful there.
Right. So I got to know Sam. I'm sure I knew him from back in my Massey Knackle days, but like the first major deal that we worked on was what ended up becoming the Dime.
Yeah.
Right. So I sold on behalf of Dime Savings, sold that site in South Williamsburg. And so I think, I don't know how the partnership with Tavros came about on that one. If like Tavros found the deal and brought in Charney, or they found it together or partnered together. Was that before your time? Or?
That was before my time. I don't actually know the origin story other than Nick Silvers and Sam knew each other, I think, from growing up in New York City together.
Okay, got it.
But the Dime is a great testament to our general thesis, which is high quality design.
Yeah.
Efficiently but expertly designed units.
Right. A little pioneering of a location. I mean,
Yeah.
now you see it's so obvious. But at the time, it was like, okay, well, North Williamsburg, that's cool.
Yeah.
But when you go south of the bridge, it's like, okay, well, now it's starting to get a little, it's just, it was still, it really wasn't developed. Like this was, to build a tower
Yeah.
in that location. I mean, it was an incredible site. It's almost a full city block.
Yeah.
You don't get that opportunity a lot. But I mean, at the time, it was pretty gutsy
Yeah.
on their part.
And now it's cool.
Yeah. Oh,
right?
totally.
Like
no, but back
North
then that
Williamsburg-
was,
Yeah.
pioneering.
Yeah, yeah. You had to have foresight. I mean, I think that a lot of that is relevant to our work in Gowanus.
Yeah. So how did so I guess by the time you joined, I mean they were already underway with Gowanus, or are you really helping them kind of dig in there and learn the market, or
Yeah, and now really execution mode.
right?
You know, it's a lot of construction at the same time. It's a lot of work to keep, 1,200 units marching towards
Yeah.
SDO.
Yeah. So you all were one of the first major developers, right, in Gowanus, or were there? I mean, I'm sure there was others, but
The Gowanus pipeline is kind of a who's who,
Yeah.
really, of real estate. There were so many great partners there after the rezoning.
When was the
Although we were
rezoning? Do you
with others
remember?
in the rezoning? I think it was finalized when I was out west, or just when I was out west, 2020, 2021, maybe.
Okay, so this
But
is
we
all
were there before.
this is all pretty
They were
new. So
acquiring
so
before.
I mean, what's amazing, and again for those listening, and in New York we have as of right zoning, right? So that's
Beautiful
that's
thing.
good in that you know what you can do, but then of course if you can benefit from an upzoning, which is what happened, and I believe that a lot of the Gowanus was manufacturing, and they got upzoned for residential.
Yeah.
So I mean, I don't know how they did that, if they tied up land and they said, hey, it's contingent on the rezoning, or did they just buy it, on that hope? Do you know, or?
Bought it, kind of making a bet on a successful rezoning.
I mean, that's pretty gutsy, especially if an equity partner saying, hey, we hope we can build residential, but things can change,
Yeah.
whether or not city planning approves, does it go through the process? I mean, and even now, I mean, we've got a major rezoning that's being hopefully going to be approved here in New York with City of Yes,
yeah.
but we're not even going to know until, City Council votes on it. So, there is that risk when you're going into a site where you don't know ultimately what you're going to get, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
What is it about the Gowanus? And for those of you, maybe for those of you that don't know about it, so we're in Brooklyn. It's on the Gowanus Canal, right? I mean, which, the history was this was a very industrial area with a lot of environmental contamination.
Yeah.
So I think this was part of it. So what was it that attracted Charney companies to the Gowanus in the first place? Like what was it about it where they saw it and said, this is something that's that has great potential?
Gowanus is the hole in the donut.
Yeah.
Right. Like you look at a map of Brooklyn.
Yeah.
And to the west it's Carroll Gardens and Cobble Hill. North is Borum Hill, and to the east Park
Yeah.
Slope. These highly desirable, beautiful neighborhoods.
Right.
It made no sense
Right.
that Gowanus would be a place where you park food trucks.
Was there transportation there?
Yeah, the F is on Smith Street. The
Right.
R is on 4th Avenue. It's well served by transit. Hop on a city bike and get up to Atlantic Terminal. And
I mean, now like you said, everybody's there, and now it's obviously there's so much critical mass. But I mean, sometimes being the first developer, it's like, okay, are you early, or like people? I
Yeah.
mean, it's. I mean, how do you know that ultimately when you build it? I mean, I get it, like you're in the center of everything, as you said, but you don't have any comps, right? And then you have to go
Yeah.
to equity partners, you have to go to lenders and say, okay, hey, we see this amazing opportunity, and this is what we think we can build, and here's our projections. But then they're like, okay, well, let's see some comparables, and this doesn't exist in the area. So
Yeah.
how do you?
there were a few 363 and 365 Bond.
Okay.
Were successful projects on the
Okay.
other side of the canal, but
Yeah.
right there.
Yeah.
A lot of it was telling the story about the trajectory of growth in New York City and where
Yeah.
does that growth go, and
Yeah.
this is a natural place to fill in.
So as head of development, so they're Charney, they have whoever heads up acquisitions, and I know Sam gets pretty involved in
Yeah.
the deal making too. So Rosie, here, here's our site. We're in contract. Like, are you getting the call? Like, okay, we're ready to roll, or are you even before acquisition looking at this and you're saying, okay, are you actually helping with the modeling? Because again, we were going over a development model this morning. You can get a model to tell you anything you want, but like a big question mark is like, okay, well, rents. We talked about how you can go try to get comps and figure that out, but like construction costs, like that's tough. How do you estimate what it's going to cost to build something? Because you're buying a site where you might not be building it for a year from now.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
how do you figure out what labor is going to cost, materials? How do you do that?
We're doing that now. We're in contract now on what we think is the best site in Gowanus. It's the large site at 175 3rd on 3rd and 3rd across from Whole Foods.
Yeah.
Fun fact, that is the second best performing Whole Foods in the whole country.
Wow.
Second to Columbus Circle.
Wow. Okay.
So this is a large site. It's the full block. We're acquiring it from RFR, and we're doing exactly that now, this kind of foundational business planning. What does this building want to be? We have 1,200 units under construction in this neighborhood already, but do we want to do 1,000 more of those? This is 1 million square feet. Right. What an opportunity to get right.
And is it all rental, or do you do condos as well?
This will be rental. But what does,
why not some condos?
For a variety of reasons. I mean, this is an opportunity zone. It may be an opportunity zone project.
Okay. So you want to keep it for the long term?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And also we do condo.
Yeah.
But we think that rental here is an incredible opportunity.
Okay.
And it's a 421A vested site, which has a lot of value.
So you're meeting with architects, right, to think about how this all lays out? Like, are you holding kind of like mini competitions of like, hey, come in and pitch us on what you think?
Yeah, we've seen some wonderful proposals.
And do architects, like when they pitch for that business, are they just doing this all on spec, or they're doing it on spec? Like, and it's pretty well thought through. I mean, they're going really deep on this stuff.
Stunned by the quality of the analysis that people have done and the excitement that there is. This site is next to Powerhouse Arts, which is an incredible arts facility that reopened last year. And across from this Whole Foods, it's kind of this gateway to Gowanus.
How do you choose an architect? I mean, I know, and this was in Dr. Off's book as well, talking about the World Trade Center, right? And they had this huge design competition, and you had design architects, I guess, where it's this beautiful, looking building, but it's like, okay, this actually doesn't work when you build it because functionally it just, the way the floors lay out or what. So like, how do you balance that aesthetic and also the functionality?
Yeah,
of the building?
execution ability.
Yeah.
We were just talking yesterday about our selection criteria because this is a hard decision to
make.
So it's not only aesthetic vision and ensuring that the vision is aligned with us, right? And that they understood our design brief. But also, do they have the ability to execute? Do they have experience in New York City getting things passed, right? You have to separate, the aesthetic concern of what makes a beautiful building, but also the execution. And this is the efficiency person in me. How can this selection de-risk an ideal?
So another guest I've had on the podcast, Amit Khurana, prides himself in bringing new architects to the market, from all over the world. Now he's doing like condos that are selling for $3,000-$4,000 a foot. Like it's a different, and it's his passion. I guess I'm probably answering my own question. He brings in his own local partner architecture firm to do the code and the compliance. So I guess it's a balance. But okay, so you do your architecture competition, if that's what you want to call it. But then how are you kind of comparing where like, wow, this is an amazing plan, but this is probably going to cost more than something else. Exactly. So how do you decide what's appropriate to build for the area and then ultimately how much it's going to cost?
We now have the benefit of a lot of data from the neighborhood, right? We have a lot under construction. We have great relationships with our contractors. We build ourselves also. Charney holds the contracts with subcontractors. We get very into the weeds on construction.
See, that's what I thought when I was asking about. I thought that you all, so maybe you didn't come from the construction side, but you do self-perform, right?
Yeah. We have.
I mean, that's a lot of units to do something like that. I mean, it's a lot of
units.
Like working with a big contractor that's bonded and all that? Like there's to do it yourself and again, equity banks, obviously they have confidence that you all can execute.
Yeah, it's the importance of relationships and I think knowing too the level of attention that we pay to every detail. Is
there a savings there too? Because obviously if you're going with an outside GC, they're obviously charging an override on the whole thing. That's how they get paid.
Again, speaking to efficiency, right? This is we view this as the most efficient way to do it.
Yeah.
Then you don't have, there's contingency hidden here, or these are my savings, these are your savings, and it lets us keep good control of the field. If you lose control of the field in a development job, you lose the deal. You can't just give someone the keys for a couple of years and come back to start renting or selling units.
So as head of development, in my mind, you're meeting with brokers, to find out, what is the market command and like what are we building. You're coordinating and heading up the architecture. You're meeting with the contractors. Like you're literally overseeing the physical development, all the steps. Is that the sequence? Like brokers understanding what you want, the architecture, bidding it out, and then actually seeing through the actual development until
Yep.
lease up? Like it's the entire life cycle of the
The
deal.
whole life cycle. I mean, right now we're getting ready to start leasing at 585 Union, which is our first building in Gowanus that will hit
Yeah.
the market. So we're putting together that plan.
Yeah.
Right. Preparing all of the marketing materials, establishing all of the pricing, getting ready to open.
So there's I'm sure there's a lot of people listening to this right now saying, wow, this sounds like an amazing job.
It's the best job.
And yet, like you never went to school to learn construction. So you learn the entire way. And I would, that now makes sense in retrospect, but like, obviously if someone knocked on your door tomorrow and said, hey, I'd love to work for Charney Companies, fresh out of school and I want to learn construction,
Yeah.
you'd probably say, good luck, kid. But like, we need we're lean and mean, like I need skills. So like, is the advice for someone who'd want to get into this to like go and, what's the degree? What would they need to figure it out? Or do they just, start off as an intern and just like literally learn on the job? What's the advice on that?
I think I lucked out that I found people who were willing to take a bet on me, not only as an intern, but also, Doug Steiner in my first development job.
Yeah.
I didn't know how to do all of that, but when we were hiring recently, and you meet a lot of really smart people, and if you find people who are smart
Yeah.
and curious and want to learn and who are into it, right? Like you can't hire someone, this is just a job, they're just making money.
Right.
You have to be into it and want to grow and want to learn and find the right person.
Yeah. No, I can, and everyone could tell. It's so clear about your passion for this. I guess it was just the way you're wired. So it's like,
I guess so.
because development, I've got to think like these projects. This is not like a 9-to-5 job. You're gonna
No.
tell us no.
No.
So like, what is like? Is the phone ringing like all the time, or like what happens on the weekends? Are you able to just be with
Sometimes.
family, or how do you navigate all that?
I'm on mom time too.
Yeah,
right?
that's
Which
good.
Is like
Yeah.
I get my kids off in the morning, come to work, got to get home and get them down, do dinner and bedtime, and then I'm on again. Right?
Yeah.
And I know that.
Yeah.
I try to tell people I don't expect you to respond when I email. I'm just trying to
Yeah.
work when I am able to work.
Yeah. So you're able to figure it out and
Yeah,
have
you just
that
gotta
live
figure
work
it out.
balance.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, this is amazing. You got an incredible story, and it's just really incredible what you all have accomplished. What advice would you give for the listeners again? We kind of talked about how to get into it, but like, what do you say to that person who wants to go get into development? Or find a place to start work. What should they be looking for?
I think a vertically integrated or looking for a place where a role is 360 degrees. There are some developers that silo, some big companies that silo roles. You
Yeah.
have a person who's a modeler, you have a person who's a construction person, a design person.
Yeah.
If you can find a place where you're allowed to touch all of those pieces
Yeah.
of the deal, that allows you to learn and carry forward.
Yeah.
Right. So you're not just iterating on the same
Yeah.
widget over and over again. It's all about the application forward.
Yeah.
And learning and pushing.
And how do you find to work for the right people? You've worked for a lot of incredible firms. Like, was it just who had the opportunity, or were you actually thinking about, wow, this is a place where I can really learn and grow?
I think both. I got lucky.
Yeah. But how do you know? Like, you've worked at a couple of places. Were you calling and checking them out beforehand and figuring out, these
I
are good
always do
people
my
to work
homework.
with?
For sure.
Yeah.
And that's the importance of relationships.
Yeah.
Kind of extracurricularly in the industry too.
Yeah.
What do you hear about so
Yeah.
and so?
Yeah. So, I guess the last question would be, what does the future hold for you? Like 5-10 years from now, what are you doing?
Well, I hope that we continue to build on our really great pipeline and expand our work too.
Yeah.
Right? Like we're talking about looking at affordable development. How can we grow to meet that market?
Like all over the country, or are we still just talking New York?
In New York, I think that there's unlimited opportunity in New
Right.
York, and I love this market, and I think
Right.
that we have great relationships in this market, particularly with construction.
Yeah.
Kind of bringing value to a wider range of housing
Yeah.
in New York. That's something that we'd love to
Yeah.
go into.
And it seems like, New York is such a big market that you could spend an entire lifetime working here, but just doing different things.
Yeah.
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 And learning along the way.
Yeah, and never getting bored.
Yeah. Well, Rosie, this was awesome. Thank you so much for joining us. I
Thank
know
you.
people are going to get like so much out of this, so we really appreciate it. It was so great to meet you on the panel and then have a chance to really get to know you better. So thank you.
You too. Thanks.
Wonderful. And thank you everyone for joining. As always, you can go to jamesnelson.com, which is where you can find the show notes for this episode. You can figure out how to connect with Rosie. There's also a lot of helpful articles there as well. We write for Forbes every week, put out a lot of content videos. We're here to help you gain the insider's edge to real estate investing. So the most helpful thing is if you really like this episode, maybe it's someone that you know who's thinking about maybe they're at a point in their career where they're looking to make a transition. Maybe they're interested in development. This would be a really great episode to forward to them. Think about that. I mean, I do that all the time. I consume a ton of podcasts. When I hear some, I send it along. That's a great thing to do. So we appreciate you getting the word out there. And as always, thank you for joining and investing the time. Until next week. Thank you.